Let's go to the guy who is currently, what are we up to? Wide receiver 9 now by rookie ADP, and that is Keon Coleman. And I said Adonai Mitchell was the most polarizing wide receiver. This range is full of widely polarizing wide receivers, and it's not hard to see why with Coleman. Doesn't even turn 21 until the middle of May. 6'3", 213 pounds, not very fast, though. He ran a 4.46 40. Spent 2 years at Michigan State before finishing at FSU. This is another guy who, like McConkey, doesn't have the great counting stats, but his share of his team's production was much better, right?
It was, yeah. He was, his profile is a little bit better than McConkey or than Adonai Mitchell.
Yeah.
Those two are like easy to compare for me, just in terms of like they've got the size. He obviously doesn't have the speed that AD Mitchell does, but they've got the size to fill this hypothetical role. But we never really saw them be highly productive at the collegiate level. But yeah, Coleman, I thought what he turned in this past year was pretty encouraging. I'm curious to see where he'll get drafted after running so slow. He seems like somebody who's just going to continue to fall down boards. He didn't grade out very well for me, just given the incomplete nature of his collegiate data, but he is really young. So yeah, I'm excited to see where he lands. I'm trying to find him in my rankings. Yeah, he's just below AD Mitchell. And some guys I have ahead of him who I think this is probably way off consensus, but like Ricky Purcell for sure. Javon Baker, I really like. Devontae Walker, like even I think you, depending on fit, could put somebody like Malik Washington ahead of these guys for fantasy purposes. And that's, I guess, again, what it comes down to is there's a lot of these prototypical X receivers that like could just fill the Alec Pierce role at the NFL level. You know what I mean? And it's like it's interesting, like to speculate on what kind of prospect they might be if they can be a contributor for real life football. But I don't know if Keon Coleman's ever going to be very good for fantasy.
Okay, and that's again, some of these guys get locked into these spots, and then they just don't really move very much until the draft. It feels like Coleman is the type of player who, based on where he gets drafted and who he gets drafted by, is going to have to move a lot for a bunch of analysts, right? Because people either see him as this top 12 dynasty wide receiver, or like you, way down. But if the NFL decides no, he's a day 2 pick and this good team likes him, then that, like, he's just, and it's, you don't want to say that with every wide receiver in this class, but for me, he feels more dependent on who he's with than some of these other wide receivers we're talking about today.
For sure.
What do you see in terms of realistic upside from Coleman?
Yeah, like I hate this because I always go to T. Higgins as the comparison, because that, like, he's the like big ball winner. I guess George Pickens, but he's a lot more athletic than Coleman. That can be fantasy relevant has been Higgins. But even Higgins, like we've seen lately, even when he's been healthy, that like he's just not getting the targets that he kind of needs, and like that's the concern. So like, yeah, I think that's like the top of the range of outcomes for him. From what I've seen, is that kind of a player.
And you think it's more likely that you'll be drafting him after the NFL draft in round 3 of rookie drafts or round 1?
Round 3 is more likely for me.
Okay, again, and we're not going to, there's a couple of guys that we get to in just a minute that Jacob's going to be higher on than what ADP is, but that's kind of the reason that I chose this approach. Towards the end of the show, we're going to talk about 3 or 4 wide receivers that, like Johnny Wilson, are not in the top 12 in terms of rookie ADP, but Jacob does like them more than some of the guys that we're talking about right now. But I think what a lot of people are going to do when they get to their rookie drafts is they're going to want to know, okay, my favorite analysts, what do they think of this wide receiver? And then they're going to go look at ADP. And so a lot of times you'll see guys catching falling knives in round 2 because they were late round 1 picks before the draft. Things went terribly for them on draft day. And people look at the ADP and say, well, his ADP is like 13th and now he's available at 19th. So I should take him here. If Keon Coleman's one of those falling knives, you should probably just let him fall to someone else. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, this is good practice. It hasn't been very fun for us because we're just like kind of negative about these guys. I don't want to be too negative about Lad McConkey. I think he is exciting. I just wasn't quite as excited by what I found as I hoped to be based off some of the comparisons that I'd heard. And I am excited about some of these next guys we're going to get to.